Hey guys, Taki here. I am really excited about this one because we're finally going to take an in-depth look at the base version of Loki almost 1 year after it was originally announced. The best part about this entire thing is this is going to go to one lucky person watching this video. It's the biggest giveaway that I've ever done. Make sure you stay tuned to find out more details on how you can enter to win. So let's start by talking about the pricing and the specs of the Loki that we're going to be looking at in this video. This version of Loki has 3 different options to choose from with different pricing for all of them. There's the Loki 128, the Loki 256, and the Loki 512. The retail prices for these are $489, $578, and $649. If you were one of the thousands of people that bought an Udon when it was on campaign, then you could have lowered all of these prices significantly. So the Loki 128 goes down to $464, the Loki 256 goes down to $528, and the highest end Loki with this processor goes to $599. The Loki that we're going to be looking at and giving away in this video is the Loki 256. So that's a perfect segue to go over the specs of this guy. The Loki 256 comes with a Ryzen 5 6600U processor with 6 cores and 12 threads. It has a max boost clock of 4.5 GHz and a max TDP of 35 watts. For our GPU, we have a Radeon 660M with 6 RDNA 2 CUs clocked it up to 1.9 GHz. We have 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5 6400, 256 gigabytes of storage, a 6-inch 1080p display, and a 46.2 watt-hour battery. This device also has USB 4.0, so it can support eGPUs. We won't be covering that in this video because it's outside of the scope of what I want to focus on, but it does work. So if you were looking for clarification, there it is. Recently, we looked at the Loki Max on this channel, but I've been waiting to look at this processor a lot more because, to be honest, I was really hoping that the 6600U would be kind of like the budget savior for this market. AMD charges a lot less for the 6600U, but it should be able to fill like 80 to 90% of what the 6800U can do. I expect the difference for emulation to be a few percentage points, if that. The kicker would be if it can do all of this at a lower TDP since it has fewer cores to power. At least that's what logically would make sense. Let's talk about some of the changes that have happened to the Loki line since we last looked at a device on this channel. If you don't remember, last time we looked at this, we came over here to the resolution settings and we found that 40Hz and 50Hz were only possible at 1080p resolution, which wasn't really that impactful. This is on the Loki Max now with the current version of LCC. Under our 60Hz list, you will see that we now have a 630p option, a 540p option, and a 480p option. But if we go under 50Hz, you'll see that we now have support for all of our resolutions at this refresh rate. If we go down to 40Hz, we have the same thing. So when it comes to 40Hz, you're going to be able to pick 720p or 648p and lock it to 40Hz to significantly cut down on your TDP. We can do this on the Max and the Loki 256. We will look at how this impacts the Loki 256 in just a moment. Loki isn't the only device that has these lower resolutions, but I think it's the only Windows handheld that has resolutions under 600p. It's not common for companies to add these, and it isn't always possible for you to do so by yourself. The deck is the king for stuff like this, and as you can see, we have a ton of extra resolutions that we can use to get more out of this APU. We have a 540p option, and that's going to lower the demand for the GPU. I don't want to single any company out, so I've grabbed options from 2 other companies. On the Win 4, the lowest even 16:9 resolution that we have is 720p. We also have 634p, but that's not an even integer, and I don't even know why they picked it. When our screen size is bigger, you don't really want to use those lower resolutions because the drop in quality is way easier to notice, but on the iNeo 2, we have a minimum 16:10 resolution of 600p. So excluding Loki, this device has the lowest resolution support out of the box. When you have an Intel processor, it's a bit easier to add these resolutions if you want, and they weren't added by a manufacturer. If you saw my video on the iNeo Air Plus with the i3 processor, you'll know that I added a bunch of them to get more out of the iGPU. It had a huge impact on performance, and I'm hoping that we'll see the same thing with Loki. Before we do a deep dive into that, let's quickly go over the benchmarks of this device. When it comes to CPU performance, we got a single core score of 1438 and a multi-core score of 6410. For OpenCL, I got a score of just under 19,000, and for Vulkan, I got 17,391. I later went back and overclocked the GPU to 2 GHz, and these are the scores that I got. I also went ahead and ran some 3D Mark benchmarks. For Firestrike, I got a score of 4747, and for TimeSpy, I got 1845. I looked back at some older devices that I benchmarked, and the GPU in this is significantly more capable than the 5800U at 45 watt TDP. It probably also won't come as a surprise, but this processor also benches higher than the Steam Deck, both in GPU and significantly in CPU. Based on my time with this, it seems to top out on the GPU performance at a lower TDP. Not as low as the deck, but lower than higher end chips, especially if you're not going to be using boost clocks on the CPU. I want to provide a better understanding of how this scales compared to other processors, so I benched a few so you can see how this lines up. For this comparison, I have picked the 6600U, the 6800U, the 7840U represented by ROG Ally, 7840HS, and 79040HS. There are other 7840U handhelds that we can pick, but I only wanted to select normal devices for this comparison so everything was apples to apples. When we look at the graphics scores for TimeSpy, we can see that the 6800U is competitive with the rest of the pack under 10 watt TDP. You'll notice some strange points from the Phoenix processors between 7 and 9 watt TDP. When it comes to the 7840HS and the 7940HS, those processors will not allow this benchmark to run at that locked TDP. They will override the value and boost to 10 watts, so their values aren't that accurate. Ally does this too, but it only happens at 7 watt and 8 watt TDP. This benchmark is a bit misleading because it would make you think that there's no point where this lower end processor can compete. But let's zoom into that sub 10 watt segment to see if that holds up. In the Heaven benchmark with the settings set to 720p lowest, we can see a different picture. I capped this test at 10 watt, but I will tell you that the 6600U will lose to every Phoenix processor that I have above 10 watt TDP, and the 6800U would lose to all normal Phoenix processors that have not been manually altered to inflate their benchmark scores when you benchmark above 14 watt TDP. I cut out the other Phoenix processors for this test because they don't provide reliable data at these low TDP values, but they are in line with Ally for the rest of the TDP range. But how does all of this hold up to the benchmarks from modern games? In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the 6600U is able to hold its own against the 6800U until 8 watt TDP, and it beats the 7840U until 9 watt TDP. I did not expect these results because this game is one of 15 titles that run significantly better on RDNA 3 GPUs. I thought that the 7840U would have a lead over the entire low watt range that we're testing. To get another data point, I ran the Borderlands 3 benchmark, and that one was also surprising. In the entire range, the 6600U scored higher than the 7840U, and this is another title that runs significantly better on RDNA 3 GPUs, so this was not expected. Again, the 6600U will lose to all Phoenix processors above 10 watt TDP, but this is still cool to see. Unfortunately, I don't have the data from the Loki Max because the game would crash each time I went into the visual settings, but I would expect to see something similar to the last test. Now that we know where this performs the best, we can see how we can exploit this to our advantage when it comes to gaming. So now let's take an in-depth look at how our new resolution settings impact our performance. Right now we're looking at Elden Ring, and I picked this game for good reason. If we head into the options and go into the display settings, you can see that we're using the low quality preset and we're at 720p resolution. For this game and a lot of other games like this, we don't have options like resolution scaling or performance options like FSR. We have RSR, but that's not going to help that much with a 720p minimum. Of the aforementioned options, I prefer resolution scaling more because I don't like the way that FSR looks. But if you don't have either of those, then you're kind of at the mercy of whatever your minimum resolution is. So for us, our minimum resolution before this was 648p. Let's quickly get a baseline for 720p. We now have the TDP capped to 15 watt, and if we just walk around in this area, you can see that we're around 40 FPS. Let's now go into the settings and drop this to 540p, which is one of our newer resolutions. When we come back out, we can see that we're still at 15 watt TDP, but you can see that we got a significant boost to our average FPS. We now have highs in the 50s, and the lows are also much better. It's a big improvement for a small reduction in graphics quality. Let's go into the settings again, and this time let's drop it to 480p. At this resolution, it's similar to 540p, but we can now go above 50 FPS. Again, if we go back to 720p, we are just under 40, and we are able to increase this by 10 by lowering our resolution while using the same amount of power. This is another game that doesn't have scaling options. Right now, we're using 720p low settings, and on this rooftop here, you can see that our FPS is between 30 and 40. Totally playable at this level, but not high enough that we can lock this to 40 Hz and get a smooth experience. Let's go into the settings now and go down to the graphics options, and let's just set this right off the bat to 480p just to see where we are. After we back out of that, we can see that we are now well above 40 FPS, so this would be a pretty good option to lock to 40 Hz if we wanted to really increase our battery life and get a smoother gaming experience. We don't quite hit 60 FPS average at this TDP. At 11 watt, we aren't really at a solid 60, but we're not that far off. This is still pretty good for a huge improvement in performance at very low power consumption. This is going to allow us to save on battery power. It's also going to allow us to set the fan speed very low so we have a very quiet device, and this will last for over 2 hours of gaming playing this game. This is going to be a smaller section, but I wanted to provide some examples for people that want to see how the Loki 256 compares to other processors in the TDP range that it performs the best. For this, we have the Loki 256, Loki Max, and the ROG Ally. All of these devices are using the same settings, and they were capped at the same TDP. Our first game is Witcher 3, and we're going to start off right at 10 watt TDP. At this level, the Loki Max pulls ahead, but Ally and the 256 Loki are very close. When we bump up to 13 watt TDP, Loki 256 falls to last place, while Loki Max and ROG Ally are about the same. Once we go up to 15 watt, Loki 256 is not able to hit 60 FPS like Loki Max and Ally. Our last game is Sekiro, and we're going to play a bit of the floor is lava for this. At 10 watt TDP, all three devices perform about the same. Mind you, Sekiro is a title that runs better on RDNA 3 GPUs, so this was surprising to see. At 11 watt TDP, all three devices are still extremely close to each other, so much so that I couldn't really pick a winner. As you can imagine, once we go up to 15 watt TDP, all three devices reach the FPS cap, so we have another performance tie. Now it's time for some game testing, and I picked a big selection of titles for this so I could demonstrate how to get the most out of this handheld. Our first game is Ryzen 0 Dawn, and we're going to start off at 540p lowest settings with no FSR. With a max TDP cap of 25 watt, we are getting very good performance using these settings in combat. If we change the resolution to 720p and we set FSR to balance, we get about the same performance. And if you don't want to use FSR at all, you can disable that and you'll have enough performance to do a 40 Hz lock if you want. Next up, we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and I was surprised by how well this game ran. At 720p lowest settings, we're able to use the 40 Hz refresh rate option to get a stable experience for 15 to 17 watt TDP. This would be my preferred way to play this game. If you have your sights set on 60 FPS, we can get there with a higher TDP cap of 25 watts. On the right side, I'm using the 630p resolution option, and on the left, we have 720p. In this clip, you should be able to see that the game is running significantly smoother at 630p by looking at the frame time graphs near the FPS.
¿Cómo te fue hoy? ¿Sí?
Silly.
Here's another title that I wanted to test out. Spider-Man Remastered at 720p using the very low preset and no resolution scaling options. I try to do the same run here, but there will be some variation. We can't hit a solid 60 FPS, but this does look like a great candidate for 40 Hz. So I went ahead and set the screen to 720p 40 Hz and ran the test again. The FPS is lower, but the gameplay is a lot smoother without having to deal with huge FPS swings. We also save some power. And just to make this easier to see, we have a side-by-side. Again, the route isn't exactly the same, but it's close enough for this. Since we already ran the benchmark earlier in this video, I wanted to include Borderlands 3, and we're getting good performance out of this using 720p low settings. Since we're comfortably over 40 FPS, this would be a great game to use the 40Hz option to lower the power consumption and improve battery life.
Anyone teach you how to fight?
My sister always loved a good explosion.
Our next game is Stray, and this one runs perfectly at 720p low settings. This game has native resolution scaling, so we could use that in combination with the 40Hz mode to probably drop our TDP under 15 watts if we wanted to increase our battery life. We've been doing a lot of testing of these games running at low settings, so I wanted to do one maxed out at 720p. Here's Doom Eternal running at 720p Ultra Nightmare. Alright, while the rest of this real test runs in the background, I'm going to go over everything that you need to know for this giveaway. I'm doing this giveaway because I already own a Loki Max, and I don't need another model. I never sell anything that I buy or get for this channel, and my goal in life is not to amass a bunch of tech that I'll never have time to use, so I'll be doing a lot of giveaways like this in the future, especially if I can get a company to deal with the headache of shipping. AYN agreed to handle shipping out the unit that I'm using in this video, and it should be open to all countries. It is very easy to enter into this giveaway, but there are some things that you need to be aware of. To enter, all you need to do is leave a comment, and you need to set your subscription status to public. If your status was not public and you already left a comment, you should delete that comment and leave it again after you change your settings. Please Google how to set your subscription status to public because I will not be linking the help article in this video. I cannot stress this enough. If you do not have your status set to public, there is no chance that you will win this because I will filter all of the comments on this video to show only people that have a public status. And just to further filter things out, your comment must include the name of one game that I tested before this current game from this section of this video and the name of one game after this current game. Then you need to add the name of one game that I emulate in the emulation section of this video. In total, you should have 3 names. Do not leave your comment as a reply to any other message or it won't be found, and do not put the word giveaway in your comment. This giveaway is going to run until July 8th. At that time, I'm going to take all of the names of everyone that followed these steps and add them to a spreadsheet. Everyone that does this correctly will have their name on that spreadsheet one time. I will add an extra entry for each year that a person's public status shows that they've been a subscriber to this channel. Anyone that is a channel member will also have an extra entry. I will use a random number generator to pick someone from the list, and I will notify the winner on July 9th by replying to their comment telling them to email me to verify their account. If the person does not respond within 3 days, I will pick another person. If you see any messages from Telegram scamming trash, please report them. I do not use Telegram, and I will never contact anyone asking them to pay me for something that I need to ship out. If you win and you are in the US, this will not have any import taxes, but it will if you live in the EU, and you will be responsible for paying them if you win. Even though this item is free, it still has a value that can easily be searched online, so be aware that you will have to pay that tax on $500 if you win. I'll be doing a lot more of these in the future, so stay tuned and good luck. We only have 3 PC games left in this video. Here is God of War. I had to use a few options for this one because of how demanding it is. I have the quality set to the lowest settings, and we're using FSR set to quality with the 40Hz mode. This takes a higher TDP to run, but it's very smooth.
We are done here.
Whoa, you're back. Lemire, who is she?
Gunnar, Mistress of War.
Red Dead Redemption is another title that I needed to use the 40Hz mode. This one has FSR, but I didn't want to use it. At around 20 watt TDP, this game runs very well.
That ride north from Blackwater, getting stuck in the storm, going out.
Careful. This might be our only focus, Arthur.
Our last game is Arkham Knight. This game runs very well on Loki at 720p low settings.
It's a bat! Get after it!
So we just looked at a bunch of PC games and we talked a lot about some of the options that you have to increase performance to work around the weakness of this processor. The good thing is that we don't need to do any of those things when it comes to emulation. Emulation favors a strong CPU, and thankfully, we have a good CPU in this. There are very few things that the 6600U cannot do when it comes to emulation compared to the current flagship AMD processors, and all of them are on the high end at very high TDP, so it might not even matter depending on the games that you have your heart set on. We're going to skip over all of the low-end systems and start with Wii U. This is a system that runs extremely well on this handheld. Next up, we have PS3. PS3 is a system that would run better on 6800U or 7840U, but if we exclude edge cases, 6600U puts up amazing performance. I was very impressed by what I saw while testing some of the games for this system.
Give it my best too. Stop joking. My name is Goku, and I grew up here on Earth. You're not my brother.
Xbox 360 is another heavy system, and I was surprised to see that this processor was able to handle some of the heavier titles that I tested. Be aware that this is not the maximum performance that is possible on this processor because I don't have CPU Turbo enabled for this section.
I'm looking for gold. You know how things is. So what are you doing up at the fort?
I'm looking for an old friend.
Well, like I says, you ain't gonna find many...
Hey, hold.
Finally, we have Switch, and this system is a breeze on this device. So that's the Loki 256. Now that I've fully tested this, I'm kind of surprised by how the 6600U holds up even compared to flagship processors. I'm also shocked that no one released a handheld with this chip since it can do like 80 to 90% of what the 6600U can do, but it's cheaper to buy from AMD. The 6800U can do like 95% of what the 7840U can do, so you can extrapolate things from there. The Loki Max is a better device than this, but it's also more expensive. But the harsh reality is that a good Ryzen 6000 series device can still outright beat a 7000 series one, depending on the TDP range that you're using. Hopefully this won't be the case when Ryzen 8000 series drops. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see another, take a look at my review on the RG Nano. And good luck to everyone participating in the giveaway. Happy gaming everyone, Taki out.